You're typically writing to people who are already thinking about the financial independence, retire early movement, but with a Bitcoin lens.
This is kind of different than the way that the FIRE community approaches things, which is like this long marathon. It's like, okay, it's going to take you 15 years and you just, you save 10% or 25%. There's not as much urgency built into the way that you think about that. But Bitcoin promotes urgency because it's just so hard to catch because it's moving so rapidly higher. The amount that you accumulate over a long period of time is going to be so much less than if you just concentrate it now.
Welcome back to Hosting Bitcoin, the show where we explore the builders, believers, and the voices shaping the future of money. Today's guest is someone who helps people take control of their financial future and make sure that it's secure for generations. Trey Sellers is the VP of Sales at Unchained, where he works to educate, equip, and empower Bitcoiners to truly hold the keys to their future. With a background in finance and enterprise sales and a deep personal journey through Bitcoin, Trey's work combines practical solutions with a mission-driven purpose to help people own their money. In a world where most people still trust institutions more than themselves, Trey is helping thousands of people learn how to take radical responsibility and to really own their freedom. Trey, it's an honor to have you here. Welcome to Hosting Bitcoin.
Good to be here, man. Good to see you again.
You too, man. For the people who are listening, I have the privilege of knowing you and having gotten a chance to hang out with you and your wife, but I've never actually asked you about how you got into Bitcoin, your background. Like, can you take me to when your Bitcoin journey began and how it turned from something that you were just kind of curious about to now you spend every waking moment in this space?
I really do. It's been a while, actually. I first bought some Bitcoin back in 2014. And not enough, as pretty much everybody can say, because nobody who buys Bitcoin the first time really understands what they're buying. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's especially true back then. It came across my radar several years before that. I have this vivid memory of I was working at Goldman Sachs at the time, actually, and they had a gym in the building that I worked in. And it was like after work, I have this vivid memory of standing underneath the squat rack and doing squats and listening to this pirate internet radio show called Free Talk Live, which was a bunch of libertarians out of New Hampshire who had all moved there as part of what's called the Free State Project. And the idea behind the Free State Project was we're going to bring all the libertarians here to this small and relatively open to freedom state, and we're going to have a big impact on the local politics, and we're going to create the type of world around us that we want to have. And I was like kind of deep in that libertarian Austrian economics. I was introduced to all of this through Ron Paul in 2008. And I kind of just started hearing about Bitcoin through some of the content that I was consuming around that, like Free Talk Live, like some of the other podcasts, like some of the other, Mises related stuff that I was reading and consuming. And so like most people, it takes several touch points. In 2011, when I was sitting under that squat rack, I remember them talking about the price being somewhere around $10. $10 a Bitcoin when I first heard about it. I did not make my first purchase until it was like 60x that or something. In those 2014 days, the price was somewhere in between like 280, I think is my lowest ever purchase, and 600 or something. But like I said, I was buying just a little bit at a time, didn't know what I was buying. And at a certain point, I kind of was just like, all right, I'm just going to sit on what I've got. And I kind of forgot about it from there. The libertarian or liberty-minded side of Bitcoin really drew me to it, but I didn't really pursue it deeply enough to gain the conviction that I obviously have now, that you have, until much later. I kind of had some starts and stops and digging into it and trying to figure out what it is. And then around the 2018 timeframe, 2019 timeframe, I, for whatever reason, became re-engaged and found the right people and who were talking about it. Things started to resonate with me a little bit more. And from there, I was kind of all in. I had also found the financial independence retire early approach, which I think we'll maybe talk about a little bit later, in a similar time frame. And I had already been just of the mindset that I wanted to increase my savings rate drastically, stack as much stock as I could so that I could retire early. So I was working at a bank and I didn't really love what I was doing there. I loved being around the markets and following all that. But I just, it was like a lot of people, they feel trapped in their corporate job. Every day's a grind. You're dealing with a commute. You don't necessarily like your boss or the work that you're doing. And it's like, yeah, we're looking for an escape. And then when I found Bitcoin as part of this, I was already like deep into that fire journey. I kind of realized like, oh, I should be saving in Bitcoin instead. And so from there on, I just shifted my entire savings focus toward Bitcoin, DCAing, putting excess cash that I had. And, that really started accelerating as we went into 2020 and what became of all of that. And then in 2021, I was in the fortunate position of being the Bitcoin guy at the bank that I was working at. I was giving presentations around, I called it Bitcoin for Bankers. It was trying to like explain what Bitcoin was and why these people should care in language that they would understand. And people liked it. There was a bull market going on, which is very helpful when you're having those types of conversations. And I was eventually asked to join a crypto working group that the board had put together with some very senior executives to run. And it was really just like a exploratory, let's understand the landscape type of endeavor. But I was the Bitcoin expert on that in that group. That was very interesting to hear these senior executives at this very large bank trying to come up the learning curve. And you can imagine how that went, right? Like I feel fortunate that I was there. I think it was very helpful for them that I was there, whether they realize it or not, to kind of tell them that like, oh no, NFTs are something that you probably shouldn't really be focusing on here. Like DeFi doesn't mean what you think it means, like that kind of thing. And, Bitcoin, not blockchain, basically was the message that I was trying to get across. And it fell on deaf ears, of course, but it didn't really matter because the bank wasn't going to do anything at that point in time. Now is a little bit of a different story. Maybe it will. And then I came across this opportunity to work at Unchained and work in the Bitcoin world. And I've been there ever since. It's been almost 4 years. It's been a hell of a journey. It's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible.
That was really long-winded. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's perfect, and perfect context too, because it. One thing I want to like tug on a little bit is when did financial interest come into your life? So like many of us don't have a linear journey into thinking about investing, thinking about retiring or saving or any of that. So what was the like early life experience that drew you into being in the financial world?
I kind of picked up an interest in it in middle school, I think it was. I was reading like old investment books in middle school, which is very strange. That doesn't make you a cool kid. I was, relatively popular for a guy who reads investment books, I guess. But I think it came from my dad. My dad is a retired radiologist. And like a lot of physicians, at least I've noticed that physicians tend to be very interested in investing and building a portfolio and like getting their money working for them. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is because it's a really hard job. Like you're working extremely long, intense hours in a lot of cases. It's very high stress. Like you're dealing with people's lives and, they've worked so hard to get to that place. I think my dad started practicing medicine like as a doctor, as a radiologist. He was 33 or 34 or 35, something like that. Like it takes so long to get there. It's so hard. And you get there and I'm sure it's exhilarating at first and all that. But it's like at a certain point, you there's not really a whole lot of scalability if you're just working as a doctor in a hospital, and it becomes a grind. after a while, I think. And I think if you asked him, he would say he loved his job, but I know I can remember him complaining about a lot of things, and he was great at that. But I think his interest in investing and building a portfolio and in the stock market, just investing in stocks and that kind of thing, wore off on me. And, it's like any kid, you kind of want to be like your dad, So I took an interest in that. And very, very similar type of journey that I think a lot of people probably is that, it's kind of aimless. He's done very well, but it wasn't like really that focus of a conversation with us, as I was growing up. So I don't think I like really took it as seriously as I could have as I was like in high school and getting out of high school and in college, even when I was starting my working job. I wasn't really thinking that long term about the finances that I had. I was contributing to a 401k and that kind of thing. There wasn't this intentional drive or this intentional approach to what am I spending? How much am I spending? Am I wasting money? And then more importantly than any of that is how much am I like paying myself, taking off the top to put
Mhm.
away so that I can build a portfolio of assets that can compound and work for me so that I don't have to work forever. So that I don't have to go through the 22 to 65, 40 plus year working career, only to be old and tired before you actually get to enjoy your life a little bit, right? Which a lot of people find themselves in, and I think it's a lot of it is, kind of the incentive structure and the fiat world that we live in. And a lot of it is just not ever having the mindset that this is even possible. This is even something you could be thinking about. And that's what really drew me to the FIRE movement as well is just being in an environment where I felt like I wanted to get out. I kind of had all of this prior context behind me in my mind, and somehow I stumbled across some of the writings of some of the early like FIRE movement influencers, and I just embraced it. And I kind of remember having some conversations with my wife about like I'm doing this. Like by the time I'm 45, like I will not be working. I'm going to go play golf every single day. I will not be working. And and then she was kind of getting annoyed with me for just like really taking it super seriously on the expense side. It's like I think I'm going to stop having my afternoon coffee, which you can definitely take these things to an extreme. That is like not really moving the ball forward in a serious way, but it makes you feel good. And there are certain people who need to do that if they're starting from like absolute zero. But I was making a good salary and all of that. I didn't need to be pinching pennies that much. Um, of course, then you start thinking about Bitcoin, and it's like, wow, if I had earlier recognized all of this and those, $5 coffees I was having every day, if I had been putting that toward Bitcoin instead of saving it and putting it toward the stock market, like, each one of those coffees amounts to a steak, basically, 5 years later, right? I'd rather eat steak than drink coffee.
Well, you hit on exactly what I mean, this is going to be to me the meat and the most important part of any conversation like this is that there's infinitely many ways that you can optimize a financial life, but for most people at least, it's so much less about what decision you're making on paper and so much more about psychology and mindset and the way that you think about designing a life. So for you, what's a kind of meta mindset that you've adopted throughout your financial journey that's changed your relationship with your financial life? And what do you think is kind of a healthy way to look at these decision frameworks that we all make every day?
I alluded to it a little bit before, but it really was recognizing it first as just a possibility that is out there. I kind of, up to that point, had approached my career and money in a very non intentional way, kind of just like take it as it comes, figure it out in the moment, not really like thinking a few steps ahead or years down the line. And not recognizing that, hey, if I wanted to, I could retire at a much earlier age, or I could be in a position of financial freedom at a very, very young age, such that I could go explore and do whatever I want to do, whether that's travel or working on some other business or project, or, you name it. Right. And just having something there as a possibility when you had not even thought of it, it kind of opens up the Overton window that you have for your life, gets your brain synapses firing a little bit to figure out, okay, well, if this is possible and I can see a path for how that works, what are the different levers that I can pull to get there? And so just opening up the aperture that includes this possibility allows you to be in a position where you can take those decisions on a day-to-day basis that move you in that direction. And so that intentionality is really very important. And then over the years, like since then, I've kind of figured out that, and I'm still trying to figure this out, to be perfectly honest, but you can just do things. Like it really, it really does take a willpower or a mindset that you can just do things in order to just do things. But it's like, if you just open your mind to the possibility of, oh, I would like to do X, and I'm just going to go do it. And then you just do a little bit toward there every single day, you eventually make massive progress, like way more than what you would have thought at the beginning if you try to map every little thing out. Mm-hmm. And that you could actually like think a lot bigger. I still feel very limited in this, by the way. I look at some people out there who, I would have otherwise just thought of them as like just kind of normal people. And then all of a sudden they're on these like massive stages, so to speak. They're doing incredible things, like making massive change in the world. And it's like, oh, that guy just said like, I'm going to go orange pill the president of the United States. I'm talking about David Bailey, and think what you will about him. I don't know him personally, but you got to respect the guy for just saying like, I'm going to go get the United States government to buy Bitcoin. And they haven't yet, but they're damn close. And I don't know what's been going on behind the scenes with all of that, but he has definitely been a very influential person as part of that process. And so I look at a David Bailey, or I look at other people like that, and he just made that decision. But I don't think it's just that decision, right? Like there's a meta framework about the way that the guy's brain works, the way that other people who are able to just go and do these things. Elon Musk is another example, right? It's like, okay, I guess I'll just start like a space rocket company, and then also I'll build automated driving cars. Oh, and by the way, like we should, like AI is probably going to be important in all of this. So let's just like build Grok.
Just sprinkle that in.
I'm tired of this stuff with Twitter, so I'm just going to buy X and do it. And it's like, he just figures it out. And obviously, success compounds on itself. So it becomes easier to make those types of big moves. But at some point, like that guy's brain is just wired to have an idea that he wants to go after. And there's not this, maybe I don't even know how to think about it. This is what I'm saying. Like I'm trying to get myself there. I'm trying to like this self-talk, like, oh yeah, I could do that too. It's like, there's not some type of filter there that I apparently have that would say, oh no, I can't do this for XYZ reasons. That's going to be really hard. You don't really want that. First sign of resistance, you feel like, oh, I'm just going to, do something else that's more comfortable. This is, by the way, an issue with the FIRE mindset, because what we FIRE folks tend to do is focus so intently on that end goal of reaching financial independence and quitting our jobs that we don't actually think about what we're going to do afterwards. Like you have this amorphous idea that you're going to play golf every day and go travel the world and all that. But then when you get there to that reality, it's much more difficult to actually be happy in that, because it's ephemeral. It's not It's not concrete. It's not actually fulfilling. You just think it's going to be. It's like a grass is greener type of mentality. And so I think that opening up your aperture and seeing where what the possibility actually is step number one, and being open to being able to see that. And then kind of just having like trying this foray out to say, oh yeah, I could just do that. And then taking one step, even if it's just one step every single day toward that goal, to that big thing that you want to do, helps to build a muscle and all that. So that's how I've been thinking about it recently. And like I said, I've got a lot of work to do on some of that. I kind of am in that period where I'm trying to figure out what direction I need to be going, because I I've kind of reached that end goal from the fire perspective. But I love what I do at Unchained. I love talking to people like you and traveling and all that. And I'm trying to figure out like how do I broaden my aperture and find something even bigger to go after now that like I've kind of built this life that I've got right now, which I'm very happy with. But like there's this restlessness. I don't know. I'm working through it.
You're hitting on so many points. I mean, we're all totally just limited by the bounds of how creatively we can think and how big we can think, right? And I resonate a lot with your story, your background. I was also the guy in middle school who was running the investing club, which was not a very popular club at at my school. And
Well, how do you think about it? Because you started a company, right? Like I've had the idea, oh, I could start something, but I don't know what that would be, and I still haven't found. I don't know. Help me understand. Like, how do you think about this?
I've been really lucky to have the right people and the right resources come into my life at the right time to open me up to a new possibility. So when I was initially interested in investing, it was a similar purpose of like, I'm going to get to this point where I don't have to do anything anymore as quickly as possible, and then I can just retire to a beach or whatever, the idyllic steady state lifestyle is.
Sounds so nice, doesn't it?
It sounds so nice, but as you've probably uncovered, the closer you get to that, the less fulfilling it probably is. And really what I was searching for that I didn't realize was not some like nothingness where I don't have to do anything, but things to do that I actually really enjoy. And going to work every day can be, in Warren Buffett's words, you can skip to work every day if you're doing the right thing that's suited for your personality. And the idea of stopping doing that is a psychological torture. So it's not a question of how quickly can I get to financial independence and stop doing what I'm doing. It's how can I design a life that I don't want to retire from, and that
Yeah.
is straight from one of my coaches. Dan has a book called Buy Back Your Time, and he describes, and this was my first exposure to this, he describes what he calls an empire, which is not like this, kingdom of people who are serving you, but a life of unlimited creation that you never have to retire from. And that was a vision that I could get behind. And as part of the kind of subconscious pull of why I've wanted to build and scale a company is I see it as not just a way to create wealth and then, peace out to a beach somewhere, but to have a vehicle that has massive impact, that is self-sustaining, that unlocks the resources to go and make change, that isn't draining, that is really enjoyable and satisfying, and that you don't feel like you want to retire from. So it's a totally different mindset than how quickly can I get out of the game to how much can I maximize the fun that this game is all the way to my last breath.
Do you ever have those days though where it's like, oh man, what am I doing? Why did I make this decision?
Of course, when you own a business, everything falls back to you. So there's no safety net of, well, someone else will take care of this. And ultimately, every problem that doesn't get solved by somebody else gets escalated to you. So you're asking for a level of freedom that most people never get. And the trade for that freedom is a level of responsibility that most people are not willing to take on. And it's a totally even trade because who you get to become in that process is worth all of the stress.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into creating what you've created, a business with employees. How big is your business now?
We just got 18 team members total.
18. Like, that's a lot of people. And in a lot of ways, you're responsible for their well-being, their livelihoods, making sure there's balance in their lives to some degree. You probably feel some responsibility for that. It's a big responsibility. You're taking on something that's like much larger than yourself. When was the spot that you like decided, despite all of that hard stuff, I'm still going to do this?
You know, it's the right mission coming along that's worth subscribing to. And I think you would resonate with this, that in your previous banking life, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would assume that it wasn't so satisfying and soul fulfilling that you wanted to wake up every day and advance that mission. But when something like the ability to further the mission of Bitcoin came into your life, I imagine you made some sacrifices to undertake that and to make that shift because it seemed worthwhile to you. And I would say that that's exactly the path that came to me, which was I was in real estate before this. I had a great source of income. It worked out well, but it didn't ignite that kind of I'm going to go change the world passion that really fuels the ability to do this for decades and decades and never run out of energy. So just the privilege of getting to participate in a mission like Bitcoin is enough of a motivator to say, you know what, I'll do some things that probably a previous version of me wouldn't be willing to do because I see this as worthwhile, not just for me, but worthwhile as an impact that I can have on people around me, my communities, the world, even if you do it well enough for long enough. And so I think it's a matter of finding a vehicle that you have so much conviction in and alignment with the mission that you'll make sacrifices that you wouldn't previously make. And I think people with significant others or children or people that they care about experience this, where when you're doing something for yourself, it's much harder to get up the motivation sometimes to really go through the hard times than if you were doing it for someone else. And to me, the Bitcoin movement, far more than just a financial asset, is a way of reshaping the world in such a profound way that it's worth taking on personal financial risk. It's worth, in the case of us being on a podcast right now, being in the public eye, something that I never really aspired to. But it's important enough that it should get talked about. It should get airtime. It should get energy. And the more resources that we can recruit to advance that mission, I don't know if you agree, but like I'm on the mission, right? We're all together in this, and it's not just to create a financial life that we want to live. It's really to have an impact outside of that as well.
Yeah, I that totally resonates with me, right? If I was still at the bank and working the same kind of job or in that track, I would still be just looking for I probably wouldn't be working anymore, right? Because I was already like a Bitcoiner. So I was already stacking very, very hard and with gusto. And so yeah, I probably wouldn't be working right now, you know? The fact that I am working on Bitcoin at a Bitcoin company, it really does change that dynamic because I don't mind being here and putting in the work because I get to have such great conversations with people who are like-minded and have same type of values and goals there. And I do view it as a mission. It certainly aligns with what my vision is for Bitcoin and the problems that it solves and the freedom that it allows for people really aligns with just the way that I view the world, which does, is very much shaped by that libertarian lens that we talked about earlier. And so I view it well beyond just the financial benefits that I've been able to gain from the fact that number tends to go up quite a bit and it can accelerate your path to financial independence. But that there's something deeper there that goes beyond whatever the financial gain is, which is that you can have some type of impact in at least in an indirect way, is the way that I think about it for myself, in helping to shape the world to the way that you want to see it, to the way that you want your family to see it, and grow up with it, and your descendants and all of that. Like, what kind of world do you want to leave to your kids? Well, it's one where that is prosperous and free and respectful and, attuned to the kind of greater good of the people closest to you, that you have community around you that respects one another, and that, you've got, like, you're not in a world where it's just dog eat dog and everybody's like on the fiat treadmill, just scraping to get by, which leads to them doing things that they otherwise wouldn't do, and that problem, that the way our society and the monetary system and the financial system and the state itself is constructed, the incentives that it brings into that, is something that Bitcoin fixes. I truly believe that. It doesn't necessarily fix it directly, but it's that sly roundabout way to just say, I'm going to build a life that is sovereign from all of this other craziness. And I have the means to do it because I've got this tool now that allows for it. So that's kind of how I view it. That's kind of how I write about it in my newsletter too, in Fire BTC, is that, it's not enough to have financial freedom in the Fire respects, in the way that's traditionally talked about. Hey, I just want enough money where I can do whatever I want and not work. Great. Like, that's good. That's a good goal. But you also have to make sure that what you've built is actually a little bit anti-fragile and is able to be protected as and when things come at you that you're not necessarily expecting, as the world is evolving, as, the state or the infrastructure around you might try to exert pressure on you that might cause you to lose what you thought was stable ground. But Bitcoin, because it exists outside of that, because it's something that just can't be manipulated, it can exist completely outside of that, and you can control it directly, and you can control it in a sovereign way that puts you in a position of power as an individual relative to all of these other forces that are completely outside of your control. And I think that's worth spending a lot of time to promote and to talk to people about and to help them understand, which is part of the reason that I do the writing that I do. I don't typically come out swinging like that when I'm talking to people who are just asking me about Bitcoin. But ultimately, I do think that, anybody who digs in ends up on similar footing when they start thinking a little more deeply about those issues.
Have you ever felt like you've done everything right, built the business, made smart investments, and yet there's still one piece missing? If you're someone who believes in Bitcoin but hasn't yet explored mining, let me introduce you to something that most people never even realize exists, and that is fully managed Bitcoin mining with Abundant Mines. We help high net worth individuals like you own industrial grade mining infrastructure without ever touching the machines. It's hands-free, professionally hosted, and designed to generate passive income by turning electricity into Bitcoin every single day. It's tax advantaged, it's asset backed, and for many of our clients, it's become one of the smartest moves that they've ever made in their investing career. So if you're ready to take the next step into real Bitcoin ownership, not just holding, but producing it at a discount, visit abundantminds.com. That's abundantminds.com and see why this strategy is changing the game for serious investors. Yeah, one thing that I've seen you write about that resonates really heavily with me, because we're in the mining space and we've always got the halving looming as this kind of like always making the industry harder for people to stay ahead. You've talked about a stacking sprint where you've got this like very concentrated time that someone is just going absolutely balls to the wall to stack as much as possible. Why do you use that as a strategy or a tactic? Like, why do you think that that's a beneficial way for someone to think about going after getting a position in this?
This is a kind of a relatively new thought process that I've had in over the last few months. And to be perfectly honest, it was inspired a little bit by the Bitcoin treasury companies that are out there and the way that they are approaching things and the dynamics of the economics around all of this. So that's very obtuse. So let me maybe be more detailed. When you are first building your stack, when you're first are starting to add Bitcoin to your life, you can make very big growth gains in Bitcoin terms very quickly. And this is just basic math, right? You've got 10 million sats, you've got 0.1 Bitcoin. Well, right now, 0.1 Bitcoin is $1,100. And in order to get another 0.1 Bitcoin to double your stack, you need another $1,100. Like, you can do that. Pretty much everybody can do that fairly easily, right? It could take some people days, weeks, maybe months in some cases, but like fairly short time period. But if you go from 1 Bitcoin to adding, so that's a doubling. Now you need to go from 1 Bitcoin to 2 to double again. Well, now you need to save an additional $116,000 as of current price. That's much harder than saving an additional $1,160, right? And that doesn't include the fact that the price tends to go up a lot over at least longer periods of time. And that makes it even harder to actually double your stack. So the quote unquote Bitcoin yield that you can generate is very high at first. You're adding a large percentage to your stack, maybe doubling it, tripling it easily. But as it grows, the amount that you can actually add to that becomes kind of exponentially harder. And so you reach a point where what you're able to stack becomes very menial relative to what you've already stacked. And the compounding effect of that is like this gigantic avalanche or snowball or whatever you want to call it. And eventually you're just like adding one snowflake to that, right? It's like it doesn't move the needle. And the idea behind the stacking sprint is you can maximize the efforts that you have if you focus everything on a relatively short period of time. 4 years is kind of what I'm suggesting here because it lines up with the halving. Mm-hmm. To say, okay, well, I can grow my stack very, very quickly and build this foundation if I just very intently, like balls to the wall, as you said, stack as much as humanly possible and really defer gratification for 4 years, basically. But I'm going to time box this because if I don't time box it, then it starts to feel like a grind and I don't necessarily know when I'm done. But if you time box it, now it's like, okay, I can see a finish line. It's 4 years from now. I know that I'm going to do everything I possibly can to build the biggest stack that I possibly can. And I know that anything beyond that is going to be relatively menial or trivial relative to what I've stacked in that first 4 years. So at that point, I can let off the gas a little and just let that momentum that I've already built from the first 4 years of focus carry me forward. So this is kind of different than the way that the fire community approaches things, which is like this long marathon. It's like, okay, it's going to take you 15 years and you just, you save 10% or 25% and you just do this. And, you know, it's very like lackadaisical almost, there's not as much urgency built into the way that you think about that. But Bitcoin promotes urgency because it's just so hard to catch because it's moving so rapidly higher that like when you discover Bitcoin and you understand what it is and the impact that it will have in the world and the fact that it's perfectly fixed in supply and the fact that other people are discovering it and going to be shoving capital in that and it's a race to grab as much of this as possible, there's like a natural urgency built into that. Whereas if you're stacking stocks or you're stacking dollars or whatever, there is no urgency built into that, right? Because there's always more dollars out there. They become easier and easier to get on a unit by unit basis. So anyway, that's the idea behind the sprinting stack, is that you can, if you were starting from absolute zero or you're starting from like, a little bit of a savings, you can say, okay, I'm 30 years old and I'm going to stack my ass off for the next 4 years. And then at 34, I can basically just coast. I can let what I've done carry me forward and I can start to spend more and improve my lifestyle. And I shouldn't need to feel bad about that or guilty or like I'm leaving something off on the table, because I've recognized that any future stacking is just trivial relative to what I've already done. That if I'm working really hard and sacrificing going forward after that point, that what I'm leaving on the table is not financial freedom. What I'm leaving on the table is living a good life in the here and now and having good experiences and being with friends and buying things that make your lifestyle better and all this stuff. There's not this trade-off as much anymore because you've already taken care of the future by the stacking that you did in that first 4 years. That's the idea behind it.
It's just so funny to me how much that mirrors the way that we approach mining, right? Is like you've got 95-ish% of the supply already out there. After the next 10 years, you'll be at 99. So there's this like gold rush period of like, get it while it's available. We're still in over 1 Bitcoin block reward times, and that's not going to last forever. And it just speaks to as well in general investing psychology, what you do early on in a very focused and intentional way that has the most time to compound is where the results show up on the long time frame. Is like if you can accelerate the position that you're able to build very quickly, then you are very richly rewarded for that over time. And especially as you mentioned, in something like Bitcoin that's got such a huge compound annual growth rate, when you're doing just like a standard DCA, I mean, it's not like you're getting a little bit more when the price is down and a little bit less when the price is up. Like the amount that you're able to stack over time really diminishes very quickly. And that's a huge opportunity cost if you delay that decision or you go slower than possible to get that position. So I think it's a really great mental framework. And it's just a recognition of the urgency of you are still pretty early in this trend. I mean, it's 15, almost 16 years old at this point, but still less than 0.2% of global assets and likely to be, the reserve asset for the world if you've done your homework and sort of align on that belief.
I also
And
think
so
that people who are just coming into Bitcoin a lot of times think, man, it's so late. Like Bitcoin's at 100,000. Okay, maybe it's going to go to 1 million, but that's going to be a long time from now, if it even ever gets there. Like, it's going to be slow going, and man, it's just going to take so long. And what I'm trying to get across to people is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It is going up forever, as they say. And the amount that you accumulate over a long period of time is going to be so much less than if you just concentrate it now.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, people tend to, this is natural, right? Like, people come into Bitcoin, they come into FIRE and thinking about like the stock market and just plowing as much money into there as possible in kind of a timid way, because they're still, it's like, oh yeah, you can show me the math, you can show me the history, you can show me what has happened in the past, but there's still this outside possibility that that's not going to happen in the future. And then I will have lost a whole bunch of money or something. Like, I'm scared, I don't want to commit to this. And so people tend to be kind of timid up front. And that timidness might stretch for a few years, right? And then finally you get across the chasm of understanding Bitcoin and why it's so powerful. And then once you do, it's like, okay, now I'm going to go, right? Now I'm really going to go. Well, unfortunately, those 3 or 4 years that you wasted, so to speak, cost you a lot of value. And I know about this personally because that's exactly what I did back in 2014 when I first bought my first sats. And then it wasn't until 17 or 16 or 18 or whatever where I was like actually starting a DCA. And it wasn't until like a little bit later than that that I actually like felt the urgency.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 1 year's difference of urgency for me in stacking Bitcoin would have been so massive in terms of what my stack would look like versus what it actually does look like right now. So I think this like mental framing of sprinting and then coasting can be helpful to people to just think like, okay, here's a playbook that I can follow that makes sense, that takes a low time preference, super low time preference early on, but then allows me to like relax. And I know that that's coming, which gives me the motivation to lean into this first 4 years, to lean into that sprint even harder, because I know that there's an end game here. So hopefully that's helpful for people as they read it, you know.
Like, listen, people, sell all your chairs right now. You can stand for 4 years, and then you can buy a couple chairs back at
Yeah,
the end of 4
I
years.
did the
You'll be happy
sprint.
about
I
it.
didn't realize it, but I did the sprint. My sprint was late 2019 through, I don't know, 2023, I guess. And since then, like, I kind of have been coasting. There's a lot of different circumstances that go into that, but man, I look at my dollar cost average and I'm just like, wow, this is great. You know, it literally does nothing for growing my stack at this point, you know? So, um, but then it's like when I'm talking to friends and family and they're just starting, it's hugely impactful for them to be at a similar size dollar cost averaging as what I'm doing, just because they're starting from such a small number.
So you're typically writing, as I understand it, to people who are already thinking about the financial independence, retire early movement, but with a Bitcoin lens. Is there something that you see, because it can often feel like an echo chamber in the Bitcoin space? Is there kind of a gap that you see in the psychology, or a common mistake you see among Bitcoiners who are trying to plan their financial lives?
I don't think Bitcoiners plan their financial lives for the most part. So that's the common mistake. I think obviously there are some people who focus on this, but I think there are a lot of people who Bitcoin is what they focus on a day-to-day basis, and they understand its value and all of that. And they certainly, like, some of them are sprinting without knowing that that's what they're doing. They just know like, this is valuable. I gotta get as much as possible. But I don't think that they've actually gone through that thought process of, okay, well, then what? Like, what's the purpose of this? What is the life that I want to build for myself? When is enough? Like, I know, you can never have enough Bitcoin. Great. I agree with you, but you kind of can, right? And so, a lot of people, I think, are very focused on them and their own stack. They're not necessarily focused on what happens to their stack if something happens to them. That's something that we focus on quite a bit at Unchained, and helping our clients to build a custody model or a security model that puts them in a good position relative to their inheritance plan. So that's something that I think a lot of people can gain from just thinking some of these things through in a more macro sense about like their total financial position, as opposed to just saying, okay, I've got a bunch of Bitcoin. Now what?
You mentioned this earlier as well, and I love that you did your sprint. You feel like you're in a coasting phase at this moment, and we talked about it already a little bit, but even people who meet their financial goals sometimes struggle to really enjoy them and actually enjoy the fruits of the life that they sacrificed a lot to build.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about saving versus spending part of your stack? Like what kind of advice do you have for people who are overcoming the mental hurdle of, well, I worked this hard to build this, I don't want to just let it go and spend frivolously? What's your kind of lifestyle design advice?
Yeah. I have, I'm working through this myself, honestly. When people who come through this fire mentality, they typically are very frugal. They're very conscious of what they're spending. They're foregoing that coffee to add an extra $3 a day to their S&P 500 portfolio or whatever. And that's very beneficial, actually, especially if you're trying to stack Bitcoin and you're in your sprint. But it also works against you when you get into that coasting phase, or when you're starting to make a transition to actually enjoying that wealth that you've worked so hard to build, that you've sacrificed to build. And I struggle with, one, I think, keeping perspective on when I'm spending money, how does that actually impact the actual reality of my financial position? That for the most part, I'm not sacrificing anything, because again, what we were just talking about with the compounding nature of all this, and your increasingly or constantly decreasing BTC yield for your personal stack. And so I've had to kind of intentionally do the opposite of what I had been intentionally doing, which is to force myself to just be okay spending a little bit more money, like going out to eat and just ordering whatever I actually want, as opposed to like thinking about the cost of it, buying things for my kids, perhaps, that I wouldn't have really, that I would have been more conscious of, to be like, oh, why are we spending money on this stupid thing? It's like, we could spend the money on that. It doesn't matter, not worrying about the cost of a vacation that we might be taking. And then actually like leaning into the fact that we could actually level that up a little bit, right? Like we could stay at a nicer place. We don't have to stay at this kind of mediocre place just to save a little bit of money. We could have both of those things, like all the experiences, even though we're not going to like be, spending much time in that hotel room. But yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to stay in a nicer hotel. It's those types of things. And I think like that coasting phase, if you've done the sprint and then you get in the coasting phase, it's actually a really great opportunity to start to build that muscle, because typically you're still working, you still have an income, you still are stacking a little bit. You're not like starting to sell down that stack, and it allows you to like build some new habits that and break some older habits that otherwise just leave you in this like frugal mindset. So it's a shift from a scarcity mentality to an abundant mentality, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's some of these people just have this abundance mentality. And I think I have grown up despite my dad being a physician and we were perfectly well off, but his mentality was, he still has this like scarcity mentality. Like, make sure you turn off the lights in your bedroom. Like, we don't want to waste that like half a cent of electricity or something. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And that filtered down to me 100%. It's still in me. Um, it's kind of hard to shift away from it, to be perfectly honest. It's deeply ingrained. So you have to put yourself in positions where you're able to make that choice, and then intentionally make that choice so that you start building new muscles and building new pathways in your mind that open that aperture, that Overton window for yourself. And then look back and be like, okay, well, yeah, that was totally fine. Like, oh, actually, now that 6 months have gone by, I'm actually in a much better financial position than I was before because Bitcoin keeps going up. So I can at least do what I did 6 months ago. That's easy, you know? Now you could do a little bit more. You could buy like, for me, I still get hung up on things that might cost like a few $100s. Okay, I'll give you a concrete example. Concrete example here. I play a decent amount of golf, and a rangefinder, like something that you shoot at the flag to see exactly how far you are from it, is something that's very helpful. And I had one before, not one that I had bought myself. I didn't spend my own money on this. My father-in-law gave me his old one after he had bought one, and it kind of didn't work that well because it was old. And then somehow I lost it. And it's been like a year since I lost it. And I'm embarrassed to say that I still have not bought a new rangefinder. It would cost me like $300-400 or something to get a good one. But I haven't done it because that $300 or $400 is still sticking in the back of my mind. And we're talking here, and I'm being very honest with you about this. Like, that would have zero, like literally zero impact on my financial position if I just buy this thing. But for whatever reason, I still just have this scarcity thing in the back of my head. So I'm fighting through it just like the rest of you all. I'm fighting through it.
I mean, it's so important. And I resonate with that so much, which is like, there's no real scarcity, but there is, in many cases, even if you're very well off, perceived scarcity. And the unlock is when you do those things and spend on yourself or spend on your family, spend on your own quality of life. I'll often tell people like the highest compound annual return is either Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining, except for investing in yourself and investing in your own life experience. Because when you put that money into showing yourself that you're worth it, you show up differently in the world. And the difference between you staying at Motel 6 or the Ritz is who am I? Who do I think I am? And how am I willing to show up for myself and put resources toward my own experience of life? And the winner of the financial game is not the guy who dies with the most Bitcoin. It's the person who lives the most full life. And I think the constant struggle is, well, I don't want to be careless, but also if I'm just a Scrooge all the way through my life, like did I really accomplish anything? And did I empower the people around me to have a good example of what it looks like to live a really, really good life? Your actions are seen by the people around you. They're seen by your kids. If you show up treating yourself well and doing things for yourself, it encourages them to go out and live a more full life as well, I believe. So it's really important to set the right example.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very hard to know where you are in that spectrum sometimes. At least it is for me. So, my kids are 7 and 9, and we're starting to talk a little bit more about money. I'm proud to say that they earned a little bit of money doing some work around the house, and both of them put half of it in Bitcoin. They're like, Daddy, I want half in Bitcoin. But we had a conversation about this. It's like, okay, well, you just earned this money. You probably should think about like, how much do you want to save and how much do you want to spend? And then kind of just put that on them to make a decision. And they know at this point that like, oh yeah, if you're saving money, you buy Bitcoin. But then they want to go and do their other kind of strange stuff. The culture today for these kids is very weird to me, but man, don't I sound like such an old man? Uh, but that's totally fine. It's like, hey, wow, you saved like half of this money that you just earned. We're going to put that away. It's going to be really hard to actually sit there and not really be able, not let yourself access it because it's savings and it's going to take some time for you to get the benefit of deferring that gratification. But don't worry because all of your other needs are taken care of and you've got this extra money that you can spend on whatever you want to spend on. So hopefully that like helps to get them thinking about the right balance and helps to get them thinking about, yes, I need to like start say like when money comes in, I need to think about like where it should be bucketed and what I want to do with the full amount of it. And it's perfectly okay for me to say, okay, I don't need to save all of it. Like I can spend something right now to improve my life and also know that I'm saving something for the future so that I can be in a even better position a year from now or 2 years or 5 years.
Just have your kids put it in a multi-sig wallet. That's that much harder for them to want to spend it.
They they probably don't have enough yet for a multi-sig wallet.
So I personally, I mean, getting to set up a multi-sig wallet with Unchained was one of the, I remember it very vividly because the amount of stress relief that went from knowing that I had a single point of failure
Mm-hmm.
to, oh wow, something could happen and I'm good. Like I don't have any more single things that could happen that could really be devastating in that sense. And also on board, I'm a customer. My mother was onboarded as well to Unchained Multisig, and that was amazing because it was intimidating even to me to get through the technical hurdle of, oh wow, okay, I've never done this before. Even after having been in the Bitcoin space for almost a decade at that point, I was like, oh god, multisig, like that's a bear. Uh, but you guys made it easy enough for me to onboard my mom, and that's amazing. And we've started also recommending it to our clients at Abundant Minds, just because you can make money, and if you don't properly secure it, that's a really bad thing. And so you got to be really intentional about that. But why, or what is most fulfilling to you about getting people to take more control of custody in that way? Because you get to help people do this essentially every day.
Well, we talked a little bit about the sovereignty that Bitcoin naturally provides to people when they own it and actually control it themselves. And I think a lot of people in their journey to Bitcoin, they come for number go up. Almost everybody does. Like it's okay. You don't have to be ashamed to say that. You come for number go up, but then you dig in and start to understand that sovereignty piece, the strong foundational piece that's not reliant on corrupt institutions and governments and politicians' whims and what have you. That's just as important, if not more important. Or it very, very much complements the purchasing power increases that you're getting from holding Bitcoin over the long term. And when people realize that, they're not comfortable trusting other people with their Bitcoin. So they're seeking ways to do that and take that responsibility, which is a big responsibility, especially if we're talking about substantial amounts, into their own hands. And typically there are two things that people inevitably are worried about when I'm talking to them. And the first one is, how do I not lose my Bitcoin? Right? How do I not just like make one mistake and the whole thing is gone? I went through my stacking sprint and I just stacked like a madman. And then the maid got a hold of my seed phrase, showed it to her brother, and her brother's eyes lit up and the Bitcoin's gone, right? Because it's a single point of failure. in that scenario. How do I protect the Bitcoin from loss? How do I not lose it? And then tangentially, and just as important, is how do you pass it on to your family if something happens to you? Any day could be your last day. It's morbid, but it's true. And we do need to all be thinking about, after we have created some type of wealth, how you're going to uh, protect that wealth beyond your life. Remind me to come back to this, because my upcoming newsletter for this week is challenging that one assumption there. But you do need to think about, like, how is this asset going to move down to your family if something happens to you? Because it could. And if you are holding it yourself, if you're taking the responsibility that you should be to put yourself in a sovereign position, it does have the trade-off of also being responsible for making sure that your family can get access to it if something happens, if you die. We focus a lot on those two questions, especially early on in the relationship with that we're building with our clients. And the model, this collaborative model, puts us in a position to help people recover in case something happens to one of the two keys that they're controlling as part of a 3-key multi-signature setup. But it also puts us in a position to help their family to get access to the Bitcoin in accordance with the estate plan that you've laid out for that Bitcoin. And it strikes the right balance of keeping you in full control over the Bitcoin while you're alive, and then also having this plan for it, for succession in case you pass. And then, we build these other financial services as well that help to widen the bridge between the fiat world and the Bitcoin world. And you asked, what does that do for me in terms of, like, giving me satisfaction in the work? People come to us with big stacks of Bitcoin that they've worked very hard for and that they're nervous about, but they understand that they want to take this responsibility. It's hugely satisfying to be able to help them with that journey. And when they come out the other side of our onboarding process and all that, feeling like, wow, I feel so confident in this setup. And I feel very good about having a team of experts, a professional services firm that is there for me in an ongoing fashion, where I can just ask questions and get answers and get somebody on the phone, like get actual responses from real people instead of AI bots and that kind of thing. Right. And it's very valuable to people. People are willing to pay good money for it. And they should be, because we're talking about multi-generational assets that people are very proud of, and that people understand just how scarce and precious those sats are, and what they mean for the sovereignty and the legacy that they're building for them and for their families.
So important. And what was the point that you wanted to come back to that argues directly against that?
We were talking about how, everybody dies. And that's been true up to this point, still true today. The newsletter that's coming out tomorrow, actually, is that would be Saturday the 26th, is kind of saying, what if we reach this point in time, which some people believe is maybe just beyond the horizon here, where average life expectancy extends for a year or more every single year. So we as humans reach an inflection point where, on average, you could technically live forever. And so it's just a thought experiment as, okay, well, what does that do to the FIRE movement and your approach there? What does it do to the world around us that is built with this finite time frame in mind for a lifespan, right? Life insurance, the way we do education, healthcare, retirement plans, the idea of retirement, like all of these things come into question if you are living for 300 years instead of 80, or 500 years instead of 80, right? It's a very I don't know where I had this thought it was like several weeks ago. And so I was just thinking it through a little bit, and I was like, this will be a good post for the newsletter. So
That'll
make sure
totally make the
that you
noodle.
subscribe. Whoever's listening here, subscribe to the newsletter so you can find out what I think about infinite time.
That's a wild way to think about it, because you're right. It changes so many ways that we interact with our
It
lives.
changes literally everything.
Well, yeah. F- Definitely subscribe to the newsletter. It's FireBTC, right?
firebtc.substack.com. You can follow me on X at ts_hodl. Go check out Unchained.com. We do complimentary consultations as well. If you are nervous about the big stack of Bitcoin that you've sprinted so hard for and is sitting on a single Trezor or Ledger device in your desk drawer, you should come talk to us. We'll help you out. And yeah, enjoyed the conversation, Bo. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Really,
really
really fun.
appreciate it. That's Trey. It's super good to connect with you, and thanks for sharing yourself with the audience, and can't wait to have you back on.
Would love to. Thank you.